I remember going over to Portally and watching the Irish Army officers dismantle mines over in Portally, and also blowing them up sometimes if they couldn't reach them. Time also when the mines were coming in, there were people that had a garage in Tramore. I think Sargent was their names, I'm not sure. But the three brothers had a garage, and somebody found something on the beach and they brought it up to the garage. And one day they had nothing to do, no cars to repair. They decided to put it up on the bench and take it apart. Well, unfortunately, the whole place blew up and killed all three of them. And then there were fishermen down Dungarvan that caught a mine in their nets. And one guy was blown sky high up in the sky. Two of them were killed, and this guy managed to live. That was down in Dungarvan. We had nicknames too. And I remember Golly, Sharoose, and Shacker. And Golly was Flynn, Paddy Flynn. Sharoose was Pete Lawler, and Shacker was Jack Murphy, Gord Murphy's son. I remember one time going out in the pilot's punt and holding the white and red pilot's flag and going out to board a ship with Ned Fitzgerald. I don't know who the other pilot was, but there were two of them in the punt. And of course I remember some of the guys I went to school with. And then there was Sheila Murphy and Manny Murphy and Jim Murphy and Jack Murphy, Gabriel Murphy, Peter Power, Ned Power, Rocky Power. I didn't necessarily go to school with them, they were a little older, but so many more people I remember. Oh yes. Of course it wasn't too difficult to remember most of the people in the village in those days. Now it's just about impossible. People pass one another by, hardly recognize who they are. And the people today are not as friendly anyway. The kids today don't seem to have any respect, and they don't seem to care about somebody else. Just themselves. Remember that it was Paddy O'Neill that had the bakery that burned down next to McCarthy's Hotel. Paddy O'Neill. Kennedys from Kincora, and a few of them I met in London back in 1949 and 50. They used to come into the bar where I worked, and I used to see them in Piccadilly Circus once in a while. But we're looking at Councillor Strand here. I remember also some couples that used to lie on the grass over the Strand and cover themselves with a blanket in the summertime, pretend they were sleeping, but in actual fact, they were having sex, baby. Oh yes, under the blankets. Very easy movements, however, so you could hardly tell. Hennessy with a long green coat and a hat with flowers on it, and she used to play the box down by the lighthouse for dances. And I think the guy that used to play another box was Michael Griffin. Is that right? Michael Griffin? I'm not sure. Packy Glody, and I think it was John Glody. Packy Glody used to work for Kathleen Harney at one time before he became a fisherman. And John Glody, he used to work on the St. Declan for Tommy McGrath. And they used to walk the cliffs over above the flat rocks, walk along the cliffs there in the evening time. Power. And he married a girl that worked in Cleda. I think she was from up the country somewhere. Milligan Power. And then there was Sauce Power, Paddy Power, Richie. It was Waxy. I remember the Dunns, the father Johnny Dunn, and the son John Dunn and Richie Dunn, Nancy Dunn. Remember Johnny Dunn and Morris Mahoney and somebody else. They used to work for the harbour for Major Lloyd, and they used to whitewash the stone churn and the steps and the slips in the harbour, and put gravel down where it was needed, and general maintenance around the harbour. I remember Dave Murphy, we used to call him Muck Murphy. He had a boat, and he had a Bollender engine. You would have to heat the engine up. It worked on diesel fuel, and you would have to have blow lamps, blow torches, for 15 minutes on the side of the engine to warm it up first. He never believed in using wrenches if he could, or spanners as they called them. Hammer and chisel was good enough to tighten nuts and bolts. Tough guy, Muck Murphy. Nice guy too. Major Lloyd used to build his own wags, and he was good at sailing. He used to win a lot of races. They were always varnished. Lovely varnish on the wags. Remember the trawlers coming in, sometimes with dead bodies on the stern. They used to have a machine gun mounted on the stern of the trawlers to protect themselves slightly from German aircraft, Messerschmitts or something like that, that might fly over. Plenty of dead bodies I saw in Dunmore on top of the trawlers. This was Mr. Bell. He was an Englishman. He used to wear a hat and jingle change in his pocket. I remember him talking to me one time about a song, Aspie a la douche, Castlelabbie, or something like that. He used to run a little shop for women's apparel in a thatched cottage up near where Biddy and Biddy's mother lived. Mr. Bell, name that worked for Westcott Pitt. His name was Paddy Bow. Paddy Bow. And I think the girl he married was Power. I think so. She worked for Westcott Pitt also. And then Sam Mitchell. And he was going with another lady, Annie Power, I think was her name. And he was going with her for years and years and years. Sammy Mitchell. His sister used to fly a white flag at 12 o'clock lunchtime when we'd be working down the Kippern House, and we'd know what time to go to lunch or midday meal. She'd put out a white cloth on the line, and we'd know it was 12 o'clock. I think there were only 2 cars in the village in those days. Maybe 3, but I know the parish priest had one, and Tom Shipsey had the other one. He used to race up and down that street, down to the pier, and back to his house and into Waterford. I remember Rubberneck Hennessy, a nice guy, Protestant guy, used to work for Lever Soaps, I think. He gave me a lift out from Waterford one time in his car. He drove a Ford Prefect. Taller, going for walks. He was always older than he was. He used to go for walks with his mother and Bridie Myler. And of course he learned all the grown-up stuff from them. He later went to California or something, and he died also. I'm trying to locate Pegette Hawkins. Her grandmother lived up in Killee. O'Connor or Connor was the name. Nobody seems to know her whereabouts, but she did live in England. Her parents and her lived in England. And I met her in 1950, after I had met her in Dunmore East and took her out a few times. And then there was the day when I worked in the Six Bells in Hammersmith in the bar one evening, and Jack Murphy and Nellie Murphy and Ivan White and his wife Lily White came into the bar to see me. That was on a Saturday, and on the Sunday I went out to their house in the south of London somewhere, had a nice tea, and then they saw me to the train to come back again. And they had a note, Nellie had a note from Tess Fitzgerald that worked in the Bay Cafe, and she lost the note, but she had a note written to me. Tess Fitzgerald. Paddy Goff. Was it Paddy? I think it was Goff. And he came from Woodstown or somewhere down there. I met him in London a few times, as I did Una Murphy. She worked in London. But I remember going with Ernie down to Woodstown. We used to cycle down there. Ernie used to date a girl down there, and I used to ride down there with him. Sometimes I'd find a girl, sometimes I wouldn't. But the local lads didn't like the idea that we were going into their neighbourhood for girls, so we used to get sodded on our way back from Woodstown to Dunmore. Oh yes. We used to bowl car tires with a stick along the street, and we had names painted on the tires, like the Royal Oak and the Royal Ark, names of ships. And we'd bowl the tires real fast with the stick and then crash them into one another and sink the ship. We used to play a game in the schoolyard called Tip the Cat. What a dangerous damn game that was. Short piece of stick pointed on both ends, and you'd flip it with a bigger stick, and it was like rounders, and you'd have to catch this flying missile or missile. My God, it's a wonder people didn't get their eyes pulled out. Wow. Of course, as kids we played with marbles and thaws. Thaws were much bigger. And we played with yo-yos. We also played with spinning tops. And you would get a stick and a piece of string and get the top started, and then you'd whip it down the street. Try to keep it going as long as you could. God, I don't know how long it is since I saw somebody playing with those. 50 years or more.